Hello everyone, welcome to Star Psych, and today I want to talk about the idea of culture and society and how it can relate to your MBTI type. One of the things that I've noticed now working in coaching and assessments with people all across the world from many different countries is that there are certain cultural norms that can really impact how we view or think about certain personality types, and it can become really easy to misinterpret someone's personality type if they exist outside of the cultural norm that you're used to. And today I want to talk about some of the things that stand out to me when it comes to culture and type. Let's get into it. One of the cultural differences that stands out the most to me as someone who's worked with people from all around the world is the idea of social introversion and extroversion. Now, if you live in or are from America, I assume many of you probably are, you'll know that America is a very socially extroverted country on a whole. Essentially, we are the types of people who are very outgoing. We're willing to just go up and spark conversation. And when we see a person who is naturally socially introverted, we think to ourselves, well, that person's a little bit weird. But this doesn't mean that you, of course, have to be an extrovert if you live in America. I'm just saying that as a whole, our culture is more extroverted than most other cultures in the world. Now, it's really different when you work with someone, say, for example, who's from Sweden, who has a naturally more socially introverted personality because of their culture. This is the part where it's really important to think about the differences between cognitive introversion and extroversion and social introversion and extroversion. And one of the things I always start my session with is asking people about introversion and extroversion, usually, and get them to kind of define it for me so I can see how they would define the terms introversion and extroversion. Because for me, it's important to make sure people realize that you can be a social extrovert without being a cognitive extrovert, or you can be a social introvert without being a cognitive introvert. They're two entirely separate things. The level of social that you are is usually a common byproduct of your cognitive attitude. So if you're someone who's cognitively extroverted, you're far more likely to be socially extroverted, but that doesn't mean you are socially extroverted. So you have to make sure when you're working with people from other cultures, or you're looking and trying to type people from other cultures, that you recognize what the social norms are there. If their culture is far more introverted socially than your culture, it's going to be very easy for you to look at them and say, oh, look how introverted he is compared to 90% of the people in my culture. And that's a really easy thing to miss when you're looking to type someone. Another big difference that people tend to miss is the idea of cultural values. So say, for example, America tends to be what I would call an STJ society, and that we very much value extroverted thinking and sensory raw information. We are a society that values success, competition, tradition, these sorts of things. When you think of the average, blue collar, white collar American worker, it's someone who's doing their best to kind of climb their corporate ladder, achieve success, get money. And those are the cultural values that we appreciate as a society. Now, a lot of the world outside of America isn't the exact same way. Do they appreciate and value those things? Sure. But it's not their primary focus when they are working on something, or they want to make sure that they're following their goals in life, these sorts of things. If you look at other countries, like, say, for example, Japan, they have very strong work ethics, but their work ethics are usually more so along the lines of, we as a team need to make sure that we accomplish this thing, and I'm going to be self-sacrificial in my needs to make sure that this thing is accomplished. That's not how we view work in America. In America, we tend to be very selfish with our work. We're very much like, no, I don't want to work overtime because I'm not going to get any real benefit from it. And these are things that we can associate with certain cognitive functions, but you have to remember, how would this function look in this specific society versus how would it look in other societies? Say, for example, we looked at extroverted thinking again. We might be able to say that extroverted thinking and introverted feeling would be the function that's more so kind of selfish in its goals and approaches. I want to make sure I get this promotion for this specific reason. And that's how an American might view extroverted thinking. But then again, if you look at Japan, for example, and we say their extroverted thinking could be entirely different, because it could be more so, I need to make sure that this thing is getting done for the collective group that I am within. This doesn't make it extroverted feeling. Just because they care about the collective does not mean that they are extroverted feeling focused. Their extroverted thinking can be focused on the collective as a whole, which is something that you're going to see as another cultural difference between, say, for example, America and Japan. You can see these same cultural differences if you compare religions in the East versus the West as well. In America and in the West in general, Europe as well, we have a very sensing type of religious system as well as our primary religious system, Christianity. Christianity is extremely symbolic in nature. They use symbols to represent almost everything. They have the cross, they have the fish, they have all these other symbols, and those represent the ideas and things that are important to them within the religion. Now, you're going to find some of that in Eastern religions as well, but if you look at what Jung wrote in Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, he compared Eastern and Western religions, and he said that the Eastern religions were more spiritually rich while they were kind of symbolically dry, whereas in the West we are symbolically rich and spiritually dry. And it's because we value the more sensory type of approach to religion and religious practices over here in the West, while in the East they prefer the more mystical approach to religion. Their practices are going to be more mystical in nature on average. So how does this compare to MBTI and personality and cognitive type? Well, you have to remember that when you're comparing the East and the West, and for example, when you're working with an individual, you can see that they might have more of what we would associate with an intuitive kind of preference for things associated to religion in the East as compared to the West. In the West, we have that more sensory approach, so it might be easy to misinterpret someone who's really invested in their religious practices to being, say, for example, a sensing type because they do the things that are associated with that religion. And the opposite, if we look at somebody from the East, we might associate them with being an intuitive because they are far more mystical in nature because their religious or cultural practices lend them to be that way. We have to make sure that we're not just saying that these practices make someone this or this. We have to say, what would this or this look like within that specific culture? How would an extroverted intuitive type versus an extroverted sensing type look within this religion or this culture versus the other? So those are just a few examples of how culture can impact MBTI type, cognition, these sorts of things. There's many, many more examples, but I just wanted to give you a few kind of big points that stood out to me when I was thinking about the idea of culture and type and how it relates to personality, because I think that these things are extremely important to note as personality typology becomes bigger. If you're going to be working with people from other cultures or attempting to type people from other cultures, you have to keep these specific things in mind. And these are the same exact guidelines that you have to be aware of if you're working in the mental health industry. When I was going through my undergraduate studies, we had to take classes all about just making sure we were aware of the cultural differences between our primary culture and the culture that someone else comes from, because they're going to have a huge impact on behavior and values, these sorts of things. So other than that, I would like to remind people that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, asurapsych.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what it means for you. This has been Asura from Asura Psych. Have a good one.